crazy. It's like 3,000 new views over the course of just a couple of days. That's wild. Okay. Ready. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to my studio. My name is Michael Markowsky, and once again, today we're going to attempt to recreate a painting by one of my favorite artists. We are going to be looking at, once again, this artist, Jean-Paul Riopelle, and this painting, Chicago 2, from 1958. And we have looked at Jean-Paul Riopelle once previously. We did a different painting of his back in, I think, last September. I wanted to do this one, but ran out of time. But I did start this episode with my daughter. Maybe, you know what? What I want to do, I'll play for you some of that video in a little bit, rather than just showing you what the painting looks like at this stage. Keep it all a little bit of a surprise and a secret. So this painting rests at the Musée National des Beaux-Arts du Québec in Quebec City, Quebec, Canada. And it's a big painting, as you'll see. Maybe here's just a little preview. There's my daughter looking at the painting in the center there, just to give you a sense of the scale. So it's a nice big painting. We're obviously not going to be painting on a painting quite that big, but let's look at the plan for today's episode. In a moment, we'll talk about how difficult it is to do if this is something you want to attempt. We'll talk about materials required. We're not going to do an image transfer in Imprimatura. I'm going to talk very briefly about the biography. We'll talk a little bit about today's painting, and I got to pick my daughter, the same person who was in the photograph there, in about 2.5 hours, so it's all going to be done by then anyway. So just a reminder to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you know when these bonus episodes are taking place. I'm not usually streaming at this time or on this day, but it's a great way of just keeping track of the show, because sometimes I do these episodes a little bit spontaneously. If you want to support the channel with a small donation, consider scanning the QR code that you see there on camera, and that's going to take you to a page like this, where you could safely and securely donate to support the channel there. If you want to send an e-transfer or check in the mail, money order, or even use the YouTube Super Chat, the links are down below to the Facebook group and my website, where you can find my email address. I just don't post it here because I get so much spam from people who've done just that with bad intentions. So hopefully you've got better intentions. If you want to join the Facebook group, which I strongly encourage you to do, take a photograph of whatever you've created today or lately, whether it's today's painting by Riopelle or something else that you've been working on, or one of the previous painting episodes, or even the free drawing course I did almost 6 years ago. I still give people free feedback on that, so scan the QR code or enter those web addresses, and it takes you to our Facebook page. Okay, so let's dive in here. Let's talk about the scale of difficulty. How difficult is today's painting? Well, here's the scale. We start from beginner to novice. Novice? I'm a novice at saying novice. I'm a novice at saying novice. Intermediate, advanced, and then a master like Riopelle himself. So let's just kind of quickly go through this. Beginner, never seen him before, never painted before. I think you could probably try today's painting, especially if you got lots of leftover paint that you don't know what to do with, which I often hear from people all the time who've been interested in painting and have over the years bought materials, but they all sit in a box and they're all mixed together. So this is a great opportunity to use some of those things that you just got sitting in a box you don't know what to do with. Let's break them out. Let's use up some of that old paint so it doesn't just dry in the tubes. If you're a novice painter, I think you should have a lot of fun doing today's painting. It's going to feel very liberating from some of the other episodes we've done, which have been very controlled and all about precision and brush control. This is all about experimentation, wildness, energy. If you're intermediate, this painting should be a lot of fun, almost to the point where you might overthink it a little bit. So you want to keep that same kind of childlike energy if you do this painting. Advanced, again, I think advanced and masters will have, anybody I think will have a lot of fun making today's painting. But I think the trick is if you have more experience, it is kind of difficult to just let go. You know, as Pablo Picasso famously once said, it took me my whole life to learn how to paint like a child again. So we are going to say today's painting is in the novice area here. I think it is just helpful to have a little bit of experience, just knowing a little bit about color. But I think if you really feel like you want to just get going, today's painting I think should be perfect for anybody. So let's talk about the materials required. Do you have what you need to make today's painting? So I did an entire hour-and-a-half long episode going into great depth about materials, but you can scan this QR code. It goes to a Dropbox folder. You don't need to tell me that you were ever there. You don't need to give me any money or register, give me an email address or your firstborn child. You don't have to do anything. Nobody will know, or at least I certainly won't have any idea that you were there. And so you can download a PDF that has all the information we're about to describe here. So, you know what? I don't want to show you the painting that I've already begun here. So I'm gonna. One thing I have to do over the next few weeks, or not next, or this weekend, next couple days, really, is to take some more of these canvases and gesso them. So you can see this is, I like this brand, these Fixsmith panels here, the 9x12 size. And you can see they come wrapped in plastic. It's usually kind of one's unwrapped. I mean, the whole thing's wrapped, and then there's another one that is wrapped in plastic. So basically I take them all out of the plastic. I use some 100 grit sandpaper. I run that all over the surface of the painting, and then I apply some white acrylic gesso on top of it. Doing that typically makes the paint, and then I let it dry, and then I sand it again. And doing that helps make sure the painting is a little bit smoother. Now, we'll say for today's painting, I did not sand it, and I did not gesso it again, because I'm going to be putting a lot of painting on this canvas. And I kind of want it to be a little, the surface to be a little bit gritty, to have that texture so the paint can really grip onto it. It's sort of like if you've ever glued something with like an epoxy, you actually want both surfaces you would sand them, scratch them up so that the epoxy can bite into the surface, hold on, so when we stick them together, they don't just slip around, they stick and they bond permanently. So today's painting could require a few rags. So I've always put this here to remind myself to get some rags out so that I'm ready to make a mess. The more rags and towels and stuff I've got nearby means that when that inevitable mess happens, I am prepared. And every single time in my experience of painting for the past 35 years is if you don't have any rags, you are going to regret it. Now, I don't even know if I want to go too deep into this because we're not, well, actually, no, let's talk about it because it does apply to abstract painting. I should correct myself here. So we're going to be using what's called a split primary palette. We're going to use 2 yellows, 2 reds, 2 blues. Because we've probably heard of primary colors, but the split primary system, which I did not invent, but I'm on a mission to popularize it because I wish everybody knew how to do this all the way back in elementary school. But it emphasizes color temperature. So every color's got a temperature. Some colors are warm, some colors are cool. And when we know that, we can utilize color temperature to create the illusion of depth in a painting. Oh, goodness. Because if we put a warm red next to a cool red, the warm red is going to appear to advance forward, while the cool red is going to appear to recede into the background. That's just the way our eyes work. And that can be really cool to create the illusion of depth in any kind of painting, whether it's a painting of a person in front of a mountain, or if it's a series of colors like we're about to do today. All right, so if you're mixing paint, just ask yourself, where do I want this color to be? Do I want it to be in the background? If so, let's use a cool color. Do I want it to be in the foreground? If so, let's use a warm color. So I'm going to use these particular colors by this brand called Amsterdam. I'm not given any free supplies or any trips to Hawaii or anything to say this. I just think that this Dutch brand is the best bang for the buck. I've been using them for almost 6 years during these episodes. They're the highest quality paint for the least amount of money. You can certainly spend more money, like for instance on Golden, you could spend 3 times the price for 1/2 the amount of paint per tube, and there is the quality is higher, but whether you or anybody else will notice it is questionable at best. Golden also tends to be a thicker, what we call a heavy body paint, whereas this is more like a soft body paint, so it's a little bit, some people would say, easier to paint with. Although if you want a lot of texture, like we're going to do today, you might want that heavy body paint. But again, it's very expensive to do what we're about to do, so I'm going to show you kind of a workaround to save you a little bit of money. I'm just flashing through all these colors, just showing you my suggestions for all these different brands. Again, all of this is captured in the PDF that you can download, print out. It's nice and formatted for your computer, for a printer at work or wherever. Or you can just look at it on your smartphone. Now, there's a few colors here I don't recommend, such as Fevicryl, Mary's, Peebo, and Museum Color. Peebo is the most egregious because they're the biggest paint company on the planet, so they're kind of like the McDonald's of paint, and they just put too much white in their color, so it makes it impossible to do what we're about to do, unless you're painting a lot of pastels. And I suppose you could, if you've got some of these colors laying around, you could use it for the first step in today's painting, just to get some texture, but I would be very reluctant to use it for the finishing stage of a painting. Kathy's there in the chat, says it looks like a lot of fun. I'll have to watch after Monday. Enjoy. Thanks, Kathy. I'd be interested to see what you do. Okay. So next step here is typically the image transfer. We're not transferring any image, but if you want to just take a look in the Dropbox folder at all of the other artwork that we have done over the years. Oops, let's show you this here really quickly. There at the very top of the... Oh, this is where the supply guide is. If we click in here, that's where you can download. There's even a black and white version to make it easier if you've got color inkjet printer or something. There's about 500 folders here. Some of them have 5 or 6 paintings in each folder. I mean, you got Gustave Klimt, Gustave Courbet, Henri Matisse, Hiroshige, the great Japanese artist. Jacques-Louis David, Jean-Michel Basquiat, and Jean-Paul Riopelle. All right, and in here. Oh, I guess I did. Okay, let me put. I'm gonna upload that right now. In fact, I'm curious to see how quickly this will work. Wonder how long it'll take for it to show up. Should show up pretty instantly. There we go. Boom. Now it's there. So if you click on this, it'll show you the image that we're about to paint, and then you can print it at home. Now it's a full color image. I'll just show you what that looks like. All right, so there's the image that we're going to be using as reference for today's painting. Okay. Next, we typically go to the Imprimatura, but we're not going to do that today because we're just going to cover it up with so much paint. So, how about... debating how I want to go about. I kind of just want to get going here, but yeah, maybe let's start here. Oh, and I blew into that box. A bunch of dust came into my. Probably gonna start sneezing here in a minute. Okay, so let's quickly talk about the biography of today's artist, Jean-Paul Riopelle, one of Canada's greatest artists. So let's just quickly go to his Wikipedia page here. You'll see Jean-Paul Riopelle is born in Montreal, or Montréal, Quebec, in 1923 and passes away at the age of 78 years old in 2002, also in Quebec, and at Saint-Antoine de l'Île-aux-Grues, Quebec, Canada. So Jean-Paul Riopelle, considered to be probably the greatest Quebecois artist of all time, and probably in the top 5, certainly top 10 greatest Canadian artists of all time. And for all sorts of different reasons, we did do, I probably spoke for at length, maybe an hour or more about his biography in the past, so I don't know how deep I want to go into things. You know, I think probably, you know, if you're especially if you were living maybe 40 years ago, and someone was to come up to you and ask you who is the most famous Canadian artist of all time, if you were in Canada, if you were Canadian, you'd probably say Tom Thompson or Emily Carr. But if you were anywhere outside of Canada, if you were not Canadian, you would probably say Jean-Paul Riopelle. Jean-Paul Riopelle, by far the most famous Canadian artist outside of Canada. Things have kind of changed over the years. I would say probably artists maybe like Lauren Harris or Jeff Wall, who's a living artist, a photographer, would probably overtake Riopelle in terms of recognizability on the global stage. But at one point, Jean-Paul Riopelle was easily by far the most widely recognized Canadian artist around the world. He partly, I mean, it's because of the work itself, but also he traveled around the world. He lived for long periods of time in his life in France, and exhibited widely in France, as well as in the United States, and that figures in today's painting as well a little bit. Jean-Paul Riopelle is quite well associated as being kind of one of the most visible members of this group called Les Automatistes, which is kind of like Canada's version of abstract expressionism, and was kind of had a bit more, I would say, almost a bit more intellectual rigor than American abstract expressionism, which is kind of typical for, you know, French people in general, Quebecois people, tend to be deeply intellectual persons. Obviously, in France, there's a long history of philosophy and philosophical thought as being one of the cultural gifts to the world. And so, unlike, I think, it's not to say that artists like Jackson Pollock and Mark Rothko, Robert Motherwell were not deep thinkers. They were, but they're also very American in that they were much more like lone wolves who were less likely to all buy into a common philosophy. They shared many ideas, but Americans are a little bit more like cats. They're a little bit harder to herd and wrangle around, whereas I think particularly if you're a Canadian artist, making a name for yourself is pretty difficult. So just like Canadians gather together in the winter to stay warm, you see that with groups of artists in Canada are quite common. Obviously, the group of 7 being by far the most well-known. Again, I've gone through all this in depth, but what else can I say quickly? I would say a big part of Jean-Paul Riopelle's life and career is in part defined by his relationship to an American artist named Joan Mitchell. We did at least one episode featuring Joan Mitchell. Not to be confused with the Canadian singer Joni Mitchell. Joan Mitchell, an excellent abstract painter, herself kind of associated with the abstract expressionist movement. But she and Jean-Paul spent a large part of their careers, maybe their most formative, important parts of their careers, in Europe, kind of away from the eye of the storm of Abex painting in New York City in the 1950s. Let's see. I just wanted to mention how important she was to his career, because often female artists always tend to be defined by the male artist, if there was one, in their lives. So I want to give equal due to that, because I've seen entire biographies of Jean-Paul Riopelle that don't even mention Joan Mitchell, but whenever you read anything about Joan Mitchell, Jean-Paul Riopelle is like in the first sentence. And we see that, for instance, about the artist we looked at just a couple days ago, Gabriele Munter, one of the greatest, if not greatest, female German artist of all time. And her entire career is defined by her 15 or so year relationship with Vasily Kandinsky, versus you can read entire biographies, novels about Kandinsky, and her name never shows up once. Right? So this is go on a little bit of a rant about gender politics and stuff, but okay, what else can I say before I move on? Well, maybe just take a quick look. So this is similar to a painting we did, The Green Parrot. So Riopelle, one of the things that is remarkable about his career, in fact, let's go, speaking of biographies, so these are some, in fact, maybe I guess I do have to zoom back out a bit. Apple always just has to update everything. Um, so we're looking at some early paintings by him. Him painting in the wilds of northern Quebec, or outside of the big cities at least. Which comes full circle, because even though Jean-Paul Riopelle, most of his greatest work really happens while he's in Paris, but towards the end of his life, after having been away from Canada, in terms of just living in Canada, he would come back and visit and do commissions, and even had a studio back in Canada, but for the most part lived abroad. But I think towards the end of his life, he spent more and more time in Quebec, especially living outside of Quebec and spending time in the landscape. I love this early painting by him. I almost feel compelled to do it as one of our episodes. Here we have an exhibition of Les Automatistes. And also, I think last episode we also talked kind of maybe in great depth about Le Refus Global, which was their manifesto. So that, again, that's really important. As I mentioned before, the difference between abstract expressionism never really had a manifesto. You had Clement Greenberg, the American critic and writer, who was kind of like a living manifesto. He would write about Jackson Pollock and Rothko and de Kooning and stuff, and sort of promote a particular idea, versus these artists themselves, like Jean-Paul Riopelle and the Automatistes, they authored their own manifesto. Right? He's also kind of a handsome guy. He is often kind of considered like the heir apparent to European modernism, European avant-garde, so much so that he became really good friends with Henri Matisse's son, Paul Matisse. Oh, I should remember that. And exhibited with the Henri Matisse's son, who became a very powerful art gallerist. I think there's a photograph here at some point. Here's the cover for their manifesto. I mean, I just love his kind of restlessness. Almost, Jean-Paul Riopelle is very tricky because his work is super diverse. I would love to see a retrospective of his work. We just had an exhibition here in Vancouver that closed that kind of had it's kind of retrospective, like a retrospective light, a diet retrospective, that had a selection of his work over time. It kind of gives you a rough idea of his work. Sam Francis was an important American abstract painter, right? And they did carry on the kind of macho-ness of Abex painting, which was, you know, tough, masculine artwork, big paintings, lots of paint, very physical. You know, okay, here, yeah, Pierre Matisse. Did I call him Paul? Yeah, Pierre Matisse. That's the son of Henri Matisse there. He even really looks like him in this photograph. He looks like a thinner version and balding version of Henri, his father. And then you see here's Jean-Paul Riopelle, and next to his famous Bugatti, his car. So, and here's, we got, there's these two great artists here. We have Joan Mitchell and Jean-Paul Riopelle sitting side by side. You know what? This kind of looks like today's painting. Is that possible? I didn't notice that before. I don't think so. It's close. It's definitely in that same era. And maybe while we're right here, I just want to show where that painting took place. I couldn't quite figure out. So here's Paris in the 15th arrondissement. So the address of their studio is number 10, so I couldn't figure out, is it this old building, which has big windows, that would make for a great place to have an art studio, or is it in this more modernist building next door? Let's just let's exit out of this, just to kind of give you an idea, though, of where they lived at this particular point in time. You'll see that they are literally just, 5-minute walk away from the Eiffel Tower here in Paris. If we zoom all the way out, right, so they're right in the middle of town. Here, all these little stars are from previous episodes where we've been talking about different artists' studios and homes and important spaces. It's not really on the tourist map to go visit there. There is a gym there, so you could go work out there, and on number 10 Rue Frémicourt. I guess also I don't think I mentioned before, but here back in Montreal, we have the childhood home of Jean-Paul Riopelle. So maybe that's worth just kind of mentioning here on the island of Montreal, kind of towards the old town. This is, a beautiful place. If you're an American looking to kind of get away, and you find the idea of going to Europe exciting but too expensive, Montreal, or Montreal, would be one of the greatest gifts you could give yourself. It's such a beautiful city. The people are awesome. Don't let the stereotypes of rude French people cloud your idea of other cultures. Every time I've ever been to Montreal, I've had some of the best times of my life. Some of the most I've met. I've been there a couple times with musicians and slept on people's couches and floors. Everyone's been super inviting. Staying up till 5 in the morning, drinking wine and smoking cigarettes. That's the French way, right? And just while we're here, if you're ever in Montreal, you must go to Montréal, or Mount Royal, which is this kind of big, quote, mountain. Those of us here on the West Coast are like, mountain? Really? You call that a mountain? But considering that much of the rest of Montreal is quite flat, this big hill that looms over the entire city is an absolutely essential place to go visit. A friend of mine and I, my oldest friend, him and I rented some bicycles, and we biked up to the top of Montréal, brought some beers and sat at the top there, watched the sunset go down, beautiful view of the city, and just lots of people go up there and hang out. And I'd say it's kind of closest thing I can think of. It reminds me a lot of Griffith's Observatory in Los Angeles, which is also a very famous lookout. Maybe see if I can see any pictures of Montreal. Let me get up top there. Alright, this beautiful lookout. There's always people standing up there, engagement photos happening on top of Montreal. Okay, I think I want to move to today's painting. So I just want to talk a little bit about today's painting and give it a little bit of context. So today's painting, let's go here. So this is the painting we're going to attempt to recreate, again, by Jean-Paul Riopelle, entitled Chicago 2 from 1958. Big oil on canvas. For those of us in the metric system, 2.5 meters, or 3 meters wide, 2.5 tall. Those of you in the imperial system, right? Is that what we call it? You know that's pretty big, like almost 100 inches. If you think about a piece of plywood, like my table here, it's roughly 2 pieces of plywood side by side, right? A piece of plywood is 48 by 96, right? So you can imagine 2 pieces of plywood standing side by side. And so here's some photographs of my daughter at the Riopelle exhibition here in Vancouver, Canada. We went to that exhibition numerous times to check it out. And we, as you'll see here in a moment, we did some drawings of it. I just find this, it just cracks me up, this kid. My daughter Edie has autism and does not speak as of yet, but loves art, loves drawing, and is super expressive physically. And so it's really, this show was a lot of fun for us because, you know, sometimes you see paintings and they're just so quote perfect and precise, photorealistic, and sometimes it can be hard to kind of identify with it. It's just like, wow, that's amazing. Well, I'll never be able to do anything like that. Versus you go to an exhibition like this, where it just feels like, whoa, that's cool. That would be fun. Imagine trying to, you know, we would go up there and we kind of act out the brush strokes, and obviously you're not touching the painting, but you feel it with your eyes. Here's a different time we went there. I think this is the time we went there and we did drawings of Joan Mitchell's artworks, which were just around the corner, which we then used to make a painting together from. I think it's very funny when she walks with her hands on her hips, or her hands. She sometimes walks around in a museum with her hands behind her back. I didn't even teach her to do that, but so it's just, I don't know, there's something very hilarious. Okay, so here's her making a drawing of this painting. Oh, this cute kid. There's her butt hanging out of her pants. I love this. Like, here's her just looking at the painting, and just look at the sense of, like, excitement and awe on her face looking at it. That's what art's all about, right? That's what it's all about, is getting people so excited that, you know, it's just colored mud on the wall and you can't take your eyes off of it. So there's the drawing in progress. You know, I was looking at this just last night. I was putting together this episode, and I mean, I know I'm a typical proud parent, dad, but I was looking at this being like, that's kind of wild. Like, she really kind of captured this painting. Like, the colors are kind of all in the right place, and obviously the energy of this painting, like, got the blue down here, we've got some of the sandy colors up here, we got the reds, this kind of forceful purple, which, you know, at first I didn't really see, but then when I look at it, especially when I could squint my eyes, I see this kind of diagonal arc of darker colors. So anyway, I was like, whoa, she actually did a pretty good job of drawing this painting. Which, you know, the idea of drawing an abstract painting is itself kind of absurd. Especially a painting that has this level of texture and detail, and colors mishing and blending together. Anyway, just super proud of my daughter. I think she's the greatest thing that ever happened to this planet, especially to myself. So I just want to share with you just a couple of... Okay, let's look here. What a cool kid. Oh my goodness. I just love this kid. Okay, here we got another one. This was after we completed our drawing, or her drawing. Good job, Edie. So you can see in this original painting, one of the iconic parts of Jean-Paul Riopelle's career, and maybe I'll zoom back here in a second, is the use of the palette knife. Alright, so in order to get this paint to kind of smear and smudge like that, he's using a palette knife, which is, you know, a pretty unconventional tool, or at least was back in the day, for painting. Essentially, a palette knife, or you could use a squeegee or a piece of cardboard, or an edge of some, like a piece of metal or whatever, like a for applying plaster to fill up holes on your wall. But you could see the texture and the kind of goopiness of this oil paint that he used here. So I think, where do I want to go to next? Well, let's come back here. Oops. Look at all these comments. Christine says, I'd be down to paint some Joni Mitchell too. That's right, Joni did do some of paintings too, as opposed to Joan Mitchell. That's interesting. I got to meet Joni Mitchell once at an art gallery. I think of her own painting, now that you mention that. I got to meet Joni Mitchell and Katie Lang in an art gallery in Los Angeles that was pretty much mostly empty. One of the great highlights of my life, to meet two of the greatest Canadian artists, musicians, in Los Angeles. Yeah, I was so dumbstruck. I don't even really remember what was said. It was a maybe a minute and a half long conversation. Obviously, I played the Canadian card right at the top, so that I wasn't just some annoying person. I was an annoying Canadian, so maybe that bought me an extra minute to bump into the middle of their conversation. Unfortunately, this is back in the day when people, before smartphones. I don't have any photographs of that. I did take a photograph of a friend of mine standing with them, but yeah, anyway. Oh, there's Senga in the chat. Christine says, I always wanted to go to Paris so I could experience the scene from Funny Face when Audrey Hepburn goes to see the beat philosopher. Montreal sounds like a more accessible version. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, obviously in Montreal, being here in North America, you're much more likely to find people who speak fluent English. In fact, Montreal, I would say, I don't know about the statistics, but I would say 80% of the population speaks English and French. There's also maybe 20% of the population that only speaks French, and then probably another 10% of the population, believe it or not, that don't speak any French at all. which is just bizarre. Because Montreal, for the longest time, maybe throughout up until the 1980s, Montreal was the business cultural center of Canada, like Canada's New York City. So you had a lot of old English money in Montreal, still to this day. I have some friends who are Anglophones who live in Montreal that have been there for 20 years and don't know how to order the check in French. I think it's just crazy. I think it's even a little bit... well, I don't want to make any judgment. I found a little... I was like, come on. You're living in this city. You should go to the one step in one direction to at least know how to ask for the check at a restaurant, because all the people that work in the restaurant have to know French, and maybe it's their first language. But anyway, Senga says, I saw Pink Floyd in Paris. Oh my goodness, that would have been amazing. Wow, that would have been cool. Christina says, your daughter is your mini-me. That's true. Oh, and Senga says she was just a baby when we saw her for our drawing classes. I know. She's so... I can't even carry her on my shoulders anymore. I mean, I can. I can't quite lift her on there, so we have to kind of go to like a park bench and kind of... and she does not feel comfortable with that. She's like, if you can't lift me yourself... this seems like a too precarious of a situation. That's one ride I'm not getting on. Which, you know, at first I was like, come on, come on. And then I was like, you know what? I respect that you recognize that this is moving into an unsafe place here. I just think that's so... because for the longest time, everywhere we went, she wouldn't walk anywhere. She would just stop and like, lift me up, carry me. And now she's like... if I start to try to pick her up, she's like, whoa, no, this is not a good idea. I no longer trust your strength. You're not strong enough. LR Fan Bro says, sorry, sir, for this comment. Sir, like anime drawing, or I like anime drawing, but I can't draw, and I know you tell me to go to your channel and watch your video, but sir, I watched your video, but why, I don't know. I can't draw like you, sir. Well, in order to draw anime, you need to know how to draw just in general. Because anime is like a, it's a subset of drawing. Right? It's a style of drawing, a genre of drawing. I mean, so it's like saying, I want to know how to make sushi, but I've never cooked. I only order food in. Well, in order to learn how to make sushi, I mean, I would say it's probably a good idea to learn how to cut vegetables. It's a good idea to learn how to make rice, to make toast, to spread butter. You know, it's like it's such a fundamental thing. So anyway, let's get going here. So, what I want to do now is I began today's painting with my daughter, and so I'm going to play for you that video in full. Unfortunately, the audio is a little, it's not perfect, so you're going to hear kind of this weird echo, so I might turn the volume down and just sort of narrate over top of it, or maybe turn the music up a little bit so that it's... but and I'm not really talking, it's just her and I kind of chatting along the way, but it'll kind of just give you an idea of how this painting began. And I would literally even suggest that you approach the painting in this way. Use the beginning of the painting as a way just to to experiment, to have some fun. Do this to a painting you don't like, that you were thinking about destroying and getting rid of, and I think you'll have a lot of fun. So, I'm going to play this. How should I do this? So you can hear that audio's a little bit. So look at this painting. That's what we're going to be doing. Oops, that's not this one. Ah! Okay, are we ready? Okay, so I just tried to turn the volume of the video down as low as possible so you don't hear that weird delayed echo that was happening. My first priority when we were recording this probably about 5 months ago was just to capture the video and not really the audio, so I didn't realize that I was kind of capturing it twice. So here, what I'm doing is just allowing her to draw all over the surface here, make a bit of a mess, have some fun, and also kind of maybe even, what would you say, like christen the canvas, to bless it with some foundational marks which are themselves going to be completely hidden underneath the rest of the paint. And then you see she's getting very excited because she sees the paint starting to show up at the table. And so here in that big bucket is where all of the colors are. She's already got a big smudge on her nose of paint there. I didn't notice that before. Okay. I'm just debating, do I want to speed through this a little bit? You can see I'm starting to get some rags together because I know this is going to be very messy. Oh my goodness. One of my challenges is always trying to keep some the paper underneath the pencil. Not that I'm worried about the colors getting ruining the table or anything. I'm just mostly, I want to capture all of her work on something so it doesn't just get washed away. So what we're doing here is, this is a whole bunch of leftover white paint from classes, usually my in-person classes, where people take too much color and I just scoop it back into a jar at the end of the class. But it's been kind of tainted a little bit, so it's not perfectly white, and so I use it for this particular thing as an opportunity just to kind of build up surfaces and textures. So my main goal just to start was just to get the painting covered with paint, and then to give her the opportunity just to kind of play with it. She is not at all interested or concerned about the final outcome of the artwork. She's pure process. She's just interested in the pure physical experience of paint. Ah! That happens quick. The eating of everything, especially art materials, goes right into the mouth. You could see that happened like a serpent striking so I wasn't really sure how I wanted to approach this. I thought, well, maybe let's now put a little bit of color into the paint, and she can kind of mush the colors around, which might be a little bit more fun than just spreading pure white all over the surface. And so this is all, again, just when you're starting to just squeeze random paints out here, it can feel a little bit wasteful, especially when so much of that paint could end up just being inside of other colors. So sometimes what people will do, instead of using paint, they'll use like a gel medium and just paint with gel medium. Gel mediums generally, or wax gel mediums, you can just paint with them on their own, or you can mix color into them. But if you've got a big blob of paint like you see in the top right corner there, or actually that's the paintbrush, but that can start to add up. So gel mediums can kind of save you a little bit of money. The other thing is that acrylic paint, when it dries, loses its texture to some extent, because acrylic paints are like 40% or so water. So when that water evaporates, it loses its volume. It kind of shrinks down. It gets it like levels down a little bit. So what we're gonna try doing here is I cut out a whole bunch of pieces of like thick cardstock, as opposed to using a palette knife, which I was a little bit afraid can sometimes be a little bit sharp. I mean, some of them don't have pointy ends, but the sides, and I've known this because I've cleaned a lot of palette knives and gotten essentially lots of paper cuts on my fingers from the edges of palette knife. I mean, after it says right in there, it's a palette knife, right? So it can be surprisingly sharp. So I cut a bunch of these like thick pieces of cardstock These are, I think, essentially what those are is the piece of cardboard that is often at the on the back cover to a sketchbook, and if I take all the paper out of the sketchbook to use it for something, rather than just throwing that piece of cardboard away, I'll save it for this kind of purpose here. So what I'm trying to do is get her to kind of smear the paint around, like Jean-Paul Riopelle, so we can get these beautiful kind of blending moments. I think she's more excited about the splatters and splashes of paint than this kind of blending experience. Which is totally fine. Maybe she's a bit more of a well. I actually, Jean-Paul Riopelle did do lots of kind of much more kind of splattery work later on in the 60s and 70s, while this work is late 50s and is I would say maybe more controlled. So I think she's more of a late Riopelle than early Riopelle, because after all, the 50s are kind of really towards the beginning of his career. You know, he really kind of gets started in the mid 40s. So this is in Canada what we would call an emerging artist. So here we have an emerging artist, my daughter, trying to recreate a painting by a Jean-Paul Riopelle, who was an emerging artist at the time. So what I want you to do is take some inspiration from a little kid and have some fun. Just get paint on the palette, smear it around. Like, I don't know about you, but like when I saw this painting and this stage, I was like, that is kind of cool. I think I might want to keep it just like that. And so of course I was like, should we just leave it here, just do another painting, or should I? And kind of honestly, after you'll see kind of where this painting goes in about another 5-10 minutes. But I kind of regretted what I did. I kind of feel like, you know what, maybe I should have just left it like that, started a new painting, rather than trying to wrestle it towards my preconceived idea of what this painting should be. So for me, I think, you know, just the smearing of the paint, how the colors blend and mix is so exciting. And when I've worked with little kids, I'd say 40% of the time, when you give them acrylic paint, this is what their paintings turn out. They just get so enamored and obsessed with the mixing of colors, the splatters and swirls, that the idea of making, quote, anything out of it just seems like unpleasant or boring, or it's like the grown-up world. Like, why would you ever, why is this not enough? curious how this audio sounds. I don't know, for me, like, this is what it's all about, is in order to get the desire to want to make more complex paintings, you gotta fall in love with paint and the experience of painting. And if you like, you know, just the sheer joy of mixing colors and seeing how colors transform, then that's gonna give you the motivation to want to wrestle with a painting for hours and hours on end, especially when it's not turning out the way you want, right? You need to have that foundational love and appreciation for painting to get you through those times where things aren't working the way you want. I mean, you can see one of the things that her, along with like everybody, is how cool it is when you take two colors and you blend them together. Those two colors turn into a third color. Right? Again, I know it sounds super obvious, but it is one of those deeply human things to recognize that transformation. So, you know, honestly, in this painting now, you know, there's probably like $10 worth of paint on that painting. Which, you know, for some people, $10 is a lot of money. For some people, $10, you know, they have in their couch cushions right now, and it's not a big deal. So if you're somebody who is a little bit more anxious about spending money, then this might be a time where you might want to go and buy a bunch of dollar store paint and paint with that for this stage of the painting. Make a big mess with, you know, you buy $10 of dollar store paint is I think maybe a good investment. You'll get a lot of paint that you can use to build up this texture, because you might want to paint over that later on. I will say often dollar store paint, though, has a lot of water in it, so when it dries, a lot of that texture is going to go away. I think there's only about another 4 minutes of her playing with the paint like this. If you're getting bored, I mean, I can watch the stuff all day, but then again, I'm her dad, so this is hypnotic to me personally. The one thing is if you're painting acrylics with a little kid, the problem is as fun as this is, cleanup is a nightmare. So as much as I wanted to just paint like this for hours, as that paint starts to dry on her fingers and arms, face, it becomes more and more difficult to get off. You need to really kind of scrub to get that off. Or you need to use something like a solvent. And you know, when you're talking like a little kid with soft skin, scrubbing, you know, with like a like a scrubber that you use to get stuff off your dried on cheese on your plates is not pleasant for them. You could do things like apply like a thin layer of like Vaseline onto your skin. There's also something called barrier cream that you can get from art supply stores that is quite popular with oil painters, that you put all over your hands. And the idea is that maybe you don't have to wear gloves afterwards, because it's gonna kind of create a little barrier between the paint and your skin, so that it makes it easier to clean all of that paint off. I found it's not quite as effective with acrylics, and also my daughter likes to put everything in her mouth, so it's quite likely that she would just try to eat that cream off of her fingers before paint got on there too. Okay, so we're gonna move on here in a second, because the next while is just lots of cleanup. Right, I've tried for a little while to use, like, you know, baby wipes to clean her fingers off, but that gets mostly kind of the wet paint off, but that dried on paint is a whole other thing. So right there we go to the bathroom and start painting. Now, so here's this next step. This is what I'm going to do with the paint, the paintings after she went off and to her room to play. And now I'm going to try to take these paintings that she began and try to bring them back closer to what the original looked like. So one of the things that I'm doing here is taking these pieces of cardboard that I had cut earlier, and I'm trimming them into smaller pieces just to help make smaller kind of quote brush strokes or palette knife marks. Again, remember that his painting is essentially 2 arm lengths wide, whereas this painting is just barely over a single hand width wide, right? So getting those kind of palette knife marks on a canvas this size is a bit ridiculous. Like, you don't even really make palette knives that small. You can get silicone brushes, which sounds kind of strange, but they're brushes. They look like brushes, but instead of hairs at the end of the brush, it's like a piece of silicone, and they're used often for people who are trying to do more sculptural things with acrylic paint. So as I started working on this, I'm like, you know what, I need thicker paint. So here's me going into these, this jar of leftover paint, trying to use as much as possible. So I don't mind, I'm very happy to use as much of that paint as possible to build up the texture, because this is all just leftover paint. Maybe you at the end of a painting session similarly have leftover paint, and you don't know what to do with it. Well, here's an idea. Instead of just throwing it in the trash, or even worse, just pouring it down the drain, in which case it just goes right out into the ocean, here what we can do is have some fun blending and smearing that paint on to make more abstract, textured surfaces. And I know this kind of thing just seems like child's play, but once you start painting with paint like this, it is pretty exciting. You can see why artists for generations, once abstract painting was born, the potential for this grew in their minds. It's just like, whoa, the surface is just so wild and complex. All that smearing of paint. So what I'm doing here is trying to recreate the general composition of Riopelle's painting in just texture, as opposed to like value or color, with the plan of then using this paint, or this, I guess technically, underpainting, to inform the rest of the painting beyond. Now I could have just used a regular paintbrush, but the difference between a paintbrush and like a palette knife, or in this case a piece of cardboard, is that a paintbrush is going to leave like brush strokes, versus a palette knife or piece of cardboard is going to create those kind of stronger, bolder lines. There's Barbara in the chat. That's cool. Just looking at all. So essentially, this is, at this stage, this is what we've got. I took those two paintings that her and I created and smeared the paint around a little bit more to get to these textured surfaces. And then now I'm going to use these to paint on top of. Singa says, just let her free next time. I love it, yes. She's having a blast. She must love messy paint, yes. Oh, there's Maruf from Bangladesh there in the chat. Since it looks like a face, I see a snail. My cat is, Christine says, my cat is going nuts watching her brushwork. I love that you say it's not boring, Christine. It's great watching the joy on her face. LF Fan Bro says, "Sir, I can't watch live because I will sleep. See you in the next live. Good night." Okay. So, let's move on to the next step here. I got an hour and a half. Okay. So, this is a lot of fun. I'm excited with... Whoa, that's not what I want to do. Let's go here. Let's try that again. Okay, so now that my daughter and I have helped prepare our canvases with what we might call an underpainting. Again, as I've said many times, underpainting is a term which has wildly different definitions depending on the artist and the technique and the period of time. But now I want to start putting some, quote, like the real colors in place. If money was no problem, then I would have just had fun just mixing and blending all of those colors. But I used the kind of leftover paint to build up the texture. I also needed this to dry. Because otherwise, not only would the paint just keep getting gray and brown as I start mixing and mixing those colors, but it would be hard to preserve some of this texture. Now this is just fun to rub your hands around. It's not a tremendous amount of texture. I mean, you know, if we could see, you know, that's my fingertip on the side, and if we go all the way up, you can see there's texture there. It's enough to rub your hand around or to want to touch it, but it's not like it's leaping off the page or canvas. You know, it's certainly not like our J. DeFeo painting, which I've talked about before. This is what I sometimes use when I've got leftover paint. Instead of putting it in a jar, I'll just build it up here on my J. DeFeo, and you can see how it's now like a half a finger length thick worth of paint there on the surface, right? So that's what texture looks like, right? That's a lot of paint on that painting. Okay, so let's bring this painting up. Let's start working on it. Okay. I'm just wondering if it's too big of a order to try to do 2 of these at once. You know what? I'm going to... Okay, so a couple things. I think, yes, trying to do 2 of these paintings at the same time could be asking for trouble. On the other hand, painting 2 of them at once might be good because it might prevent me from overdoing it, because I'm working on 2 separate things. My thinking is that maybe that would distract me enough to allow this painting to be kind of spontaneous. I'm just thinking out loud here. So, how should we proceed here? Let's get some paints out. It's entirely possible that everything I'm about to do could turn into a disaster. I guess there's a bit of black in here. Okay, so my thinking is rather than putting a paint on a palette is just to try putting the paint directly on the canvas. Right? Okay, so how about, let's bring these side by, maybe let's start out, I'm going to zoom all the way out here. Or maybe we'll do it like that. Okay, there's my warm red. So it's warm red, warm yellow. Maybe I'll keep cool yellow for a moment to the side. Let's take our cool blue. I got cool red in there. I don't know if I've got any cool red in this painting. I've got some warm blue, however, up here. And then, oh, I got this new tube of white. Okay, I've got to be a little bit careful with the white because that can make everything very pastel really quickly. And I might reserve the black for a little bit later here. Okay. How do we want to do this, Michael? Let's move one out of the way. I should also note, when these paintings get this much paint on them, they will kind of warp a little bit. And just something to keep in mind is that's just very typical. Okay. How about let's zoom right in? Oops. Okay, so I'm not sure exactly which are the right brushes to use. But I do think having lots of brushes available is a good idea. Again, lots of rags. I'm not so worried right now about making a mess, but I'm probably going to be cleaning some brushes as we go, and I might want to have somewhere where I can leave my brushes while they're wet. It's okay, so I'm just going to take this rag, I'm going to twist it up, and let's put this here. That way I can rest my brushes that are covered with paint here. Now I got these bigger brushes. I wonder, I'm going to put those off to the side. I think I might try to use a smaller brush, right? One of these 1/4 brushes, right? It's about the size of my pinky finger here. Paint is already somehow getting all over the place, so that's a good thing. Barbara says, did I miss Edie? Yeah, for about half hour we had her here painting along with me. Again, where's all this paint coming from? Okay, so let's just go right into this painting. You can let me know in the chat if you'd like to see more of these paintings zoomed all the way out. Okay. I'm going to leave the other one for a few moments and focus on this one and allow this to build up. That way, if I make some mistakes and I go like, oh, you know what, I should have done that, then I can like, oh, got another one I'm ready to play with. I don't want to completely hide the previous layer down there below. I like some of that texture. Well, obviously I like the texture, but I like some of those colors too. So maybe what makes sense is to just start going in here, blend some of these together. Reds and reds. Now, there's not a lot of brown in this painting. If I start painting with this color on the paint, if I start mixing this into my blues, this color's going to go brown and then gray very quickly. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put this paintbrush off to the side on my little stand there. And then let's go to a different color now. Maybe, where should we go? Should we go to our blues here? I also don't see a lot of purple happening. You can see brown forming there. I don't know how much of that I want to encourage. Okay. So notice I haven't touched my white yet. Once I start putting white in there, the colors are going to start becoming more paler, more pastel. And while there is lots of white in this painting, I kind of want to, you got to be careful, because otherwise it's just, the paint is going to go gray instantly. So I'm just kind of biding my time here for a moment to build up to that moment. Okay. So now what feels kind of nice is a lot of the, it doesn't feel like paint is just sitting on top of another surface. It's starting to feel like things are being integrated a little bit better. So, I mean, I don't know. I kind of dig in this right now. Let me see. You know, a big part of doing this is surprisingly restraint, right? Because maybe, I don't know about you, but my instinct would be just to go in here and just smudge the paint around, just like my daughter did, and make a big, wild mess. And while that can be really fun, it can get out of control, which, again, that's often why people make this kind of painting, is precisely to lose control. But I think I'm going to just be careful here for a moment. So, okay, so I'm going to try the other painting now. And I'm going to blend these colors around. This one has a little bit less colorful of a surface to start with. I'm going to try to resist the urge to make these two paintings look exactly the same. I'm kind of starting with the same composition, roughly similar textures, but I want to allow myself to not, like, essentially what I want to do is use Riopelle's painting as a starting point, but not as the be-all, end-all. And that's what I tried to do anyway, but... Maybe I'll go more into the yellow now. Singa says, I'm loving it already. Awesome. There's Ari in the chat. Hi, Ari. You know, for a painting that's got so many beautiful, bright, saturated colors in there, the fact that we don't see very many greens or browns or really a lot of grays is kind of remarkable. It's almost... I'm not even sure exactly how that happens. be... I'm trying to think, should I clean my brush off? Maybe I'm just going to wipe my brush off on the painting here. Now I'm going to go in to the white. I think I'm going to need lots more white in here. Alright, so that color on my brush is starting to kind of get a little bit muddy, a little bit gray. So, in fact, I might just take my brush and just clean it off some of that excess paint. Okay. Let's move this one out of the way. Come back to this one. So painting like this is going to go through a few different lives, right? There's going to be times where it's going to be like, oh, wow, I just did it. Amazing. This is amazing. Best thing. And then it's like, oh, my goodness, this is what a nightmare. Dog's breakfast. What have I created? I think I kind of liked it a little bit better before I just did what I just did. That's okay. Okay, I think what I'm going to do now is try to put some black in here. I'm going to clean these brushes out. I'm not going to completely clean them, just wiping off the excess paint. Okay. I mean, these are wild. It's really fun painting like this. If you've never done anything with this level of texture or goopiness with color, or done anything abstract to begin with, something like this could feel liberating. One of the most liberating things you could do. Or it could just scare the socks off you, where you're like, oh my goodness, I need some structure. This just feels like I'm losing my mind, right? And I'll be honest, when I was in graduate school, I tried doing abstract painting, and it really felt like I was losing my grip on reality, because when you don't have any rules or structure where you can literally do anything you want, right? All of a sudden, I felt kind of like I was becoming untethered from reality, and like almost having an existential kind of panic about, oh my goodness, like if I can do any kind of painting whatsoever, there's no rules, then what rules exist outside of this? Like, and you know, maybe that could allow somebody to become a criminal or something. Mine was more just like you know, it was just kind of a not a comfortable place for me to be. I prefer, when I'm making paintings, to the paintings I make to kind of ride the edge of between abstraction and representation. I still like seeing recognizable elements. I think what's interesting is we see that actually in the work of Jackson Pollock, and Jackson Pollock's you know, we're going to be doing two Jackson Pollock paintings next week. But at the end of Jackson Pollock's career, he reintroduced figures back into the landscape, or into his paintings. Is there... Right, like this is one of his last paintings. Come on. I don't know why I can't. But anyway, I think that was because he'd been kind of losing his mind into abstraction, and it was a little bit, he felt untethered to reality, and that, him coming back into reintroducing figurative elements like faces and things, bodies, caused his greatest champion, Clement Greenberg, to totally abandon him. And it's sort of like, you can imagine like a musician who's famous for doing one thing, doing something completely different, and everyone ridiculing, abandoning that that person, and kind of having this like, well, I don't really want to do that anymore, but nobody wants what I'm doing now, and now I don't know who I am or what I'm doing. And okay, so I'm going to take this tube of black paint here, and what do I want to do? Okay, let's put this back here. Okay, so we got black in this. Ooh, this is pretty goopy, thick, dried black paint. Wonder how this is going to behave. Maybe not so good. I don't know. Okay, let's move this one out of the way, bring the other one back. Barbara says, I have to do this one outside in the summer, where I can splash paint about and make a big mess. I love it. Last bits of paint. No wonder. So this is a tube of paint I've had for 5 years now, since we started the channel, and I am only now finally using it up. fact, I'm almost out of the other black tube. I'm out of this. I've used this entire thing here. Let me see if there's some paint I can squeeze out of the last little bits. Okay. Any more paint hidden in here? So maybe it's worth now taking a look at these two paintings side by side. The original. Actually, maybe even before that. It's going to clean off the excess paint on these brushes. I mean, that is definitely a goopy fun times. So at the moment, there are places where the color seems to be sitting on top of what I called my underpainting. But part of that is that the dried paint is matte and this wet paint appears reflective, glossy. And one of the things I'm kind of banking on is as the top layer that I've just been painting dries, it's going to start integrating better into the layers below and look less like something that's just been painted over top and something that could have been painted at the same time. I can't say that it's absolutely 100% going to work. The only way we would know is after the painting's dried. Okay. So, well, let's... Tabata... Or Taba says, hey, I just discovered your drawing class from COVID, and I'm really enjoying them. Thank you so much. Awesome. Hopefully I got your username or name correct there. Let's... How do I want to do this? Let's do... Okay. Barbara says, I just had a quick look at the earlier video. Evie is an absolute star, loving every minute of the painting. I see she enjoyed doing spirals in the paint. You're a great dad. Oh, too sweet. I appreciate that. Thank you so much, Barbara. Okay, so now we got some painting done. Let's do finishing touches, see what these paintings looks like at the moment side by side, and determine if there's anything we want to do here. So your original's on the left. I've got two versions here, and you can see that those two versions look pretty different. Right? I've decided to put different paint in different places, just by accident. Because one thing, as I started making the painting, I was like, you know what? I'm not going to force myself to try to recreate this painting as closely as possible. I've got the colors are roughly in the same place, but you see this one's got a lot more yellow. This one has much less yellow. So what do I want to do here? Maybe I want to let's put a bit more yellow, you know, or should I? This one maybe has less. What color, instead of yellow here or here, what could we put there instead? Maybe I'm going to put some more blue there. I kind of think maybe I liked the yellow there before, but contemplating maybe putting white here. Also contemplating maybe putting white back in here. I don't know. I'm kind of at this. I'm starting to kind of struggle with if there's anything new I want to put into these paintings. Like if there was a color that ran there, what color would that be? I think I want that to be a bit more warm red. You know what? I think I got to go back to just looking at one at a time. I think it's I'm a little overwhelmed trying to look at them together. So I'm thinking about this line here in the center. Oops. Or is it good? I don't know. It's hard to tell. I mean, I know that this can be kind of the thing that some people are like, dude, are you crazy? No matter what color you put there, it's gonna look weird, bizarre, terrible, beautiful. So what am I trying to do? Right now, I'm looking for places that feel undercooked, that seem too simple, maybe not enough play with paint or something going on. Maybe a warm blue going across there. I don't know. Again, this is why, for me, painting, abstract painting is kind of tricky and almost like, because it's like, how on earth do you know when a painting like this is done? I think that's good though. I'm looking in areas where I feel like does it look a little bit incomplete, like. I mean, it all kind of looks sloppy. I think this one's okay. I can live with this one. So let's just bring this one back. You know, painters will sometimes talk about a painting being done when you look at it and you're just like, I don't know what else I can do. Kind of so, again, let's bring the original back for possible inspiration. Let's see, areas that I enjoy. I like this, I like this. Where are my... Like Marie Kondo here. What inspires joy and what doesn't? Where does it feel out of balance? Barbara says, I have lots of little tubes of oil paint that I've never used. This could be the ideal painting to use them all up. Great idea. Christine says, I'm having fun just lightly rolling my brush all over the different colors and getting new ideas for backgrounds. I love it. I feel like that other painting had a few little teal or green places that this one doesn't have. And I really like teal, is one of my favorite colors, so like I need a little bit of that, a little pop of green in here. I don't know. I think I might be at the end. Does it look like the original? I think the more and more I've painted on it, the more it's diverged from the original. But I think even Jean-Paul Riopelle himself would probably say that if it looked like the original, then I was doing it wrong. That I completely missed the point of this painting. Or this type of painting. That it's not about, unlike, you know, painting, recreating, like Gabriele Munter's landscape we did a couple days ago. It would almost seem a little bit absurd to try to, because then it wouldn't capture the energy, the motion of the original. Motion and emotion of the original. Okay, I think, yeah, let's, let's... Chrissy says, I think I failed this class, though. Oh, no. I don't think there's any way to fail. Okay, we've reached the end of the episode. I want to do a side-by-side comparison and compare the original by the great master Jean-Paul Riopelle and the version that I've just been working on here with the assistance of my daughter. And so before we do so, just a quick reminder to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell if you saw something that was funny or interesting or useful. Consider asking for more by subscribing. Right? It helps the algorithm so more people see it. If you want to support the channel with a couple dollars donation, $5 to help keep the lights on, help keep the internet streaming from me to you, you can scan the QR code or enter in that web address. That'll take you to a place like this where you could safely and securely donate to support the channel. And I'd say pretty much everybody who's in the chat there right now are regular supporters, financial supporters of the channel. So thank you to those of you who've been so generous over the years as we approach our 6th anniversary in March. Other ways you could donate is send an e-transfer by email or check or in the mail. To get that information, you got to go to the Facebook group or my website. Those links are down below. I just don't post it here just to save myself. To slow the deluge of Russian troll emails, scams, and things that are constantly... I get like 100 emails every day. So if you ever do send me an email and I'm slow getting back to it, it's because it's hard to wade through the forest of scams. Okay, so I encourage you to take a photograph of whatever you've created today. Join our Facebook group, upload it there so we can see what you've done and celebrate it, and maybe I can offer you some free advice on how to improve your work. This is what our Facebook group looks like. We're doing another bonus episode, feedback episode in February, so I'd love to see what you created. Okay, so here's the original painting. That's some information about it. Again, it's just important to remember how big this original painting actually was, or is, right? There's a photograph of my daughter standing in front of this painting, and to give you just a context, it's, you know, it's like two adult human beings standing side by side, touching arms. That gives you an idea of roughly the scale, floor to ceiling, 2 arms lengths wide. So there's the painting. Let's, in no particular order, we'll look at this version here first. Maybe it's time to, I don't think we've zoomed in on this painting really at all. I mean, it seems kind of absurd to zoom in and compare the different areas of the painting, but why not? Who doesn't love a little bit of absurdity in life? I think I'm pretty zoomed in, so I might just actually zoom out a bit here. Okay. So one thing that becomes apparent as we look at the original is you'll notice he's got, I didn't even really think about it until just now, but these very small little, they're not brush strokes, they're palette knife strokes in here. It's made up, it's almost like a little bit of pointillism, these little dabs. So that's definitely something I did not do in my painting. It's hard to say whether that would have benefited it or not. I think just in terms of scale, I wouldn't have been able to capture that. Color-wise, relatively close. I mean, this looks maybe, well, I guess that looks relatively cool on the screen. I think in person they're very close. I could have maybe had a little bit more white in this particular section in the bottom left corner, but when you're painting this kind of way, it's pretty hard to manage those colors, right? Oops, come on. Right, so obviously there's going to be some major differences. Like, for instance, this big brush stroke of greenish yellow blue is nowhere in this top left of the painting. But when I was working on my painting, I kind of felt like it needed it there. I wanted it there. I like that color, and I didn't have it really anywhere else. Okay. Binge Bear says, hello, new here. I have a random question. I'm interested in getting into painting, and a friend recommended paint by numbers to help with brush control and building confidence. Thoughts? Well, some people have accused my entire channel of paint by numbers. I don't think there's anything wrong with paint by numbers, but I've done this is episode 391, and so you can paint all of the literally the most famous paintings ever made by other human beings in a kind of a paint by numbers approach. But instead of just painting little areas at a time, you understand the whole, like a more complete, more developed approach to painting. It's the same sort of approach I use. I teach at Canada's best art school, Emily Carr University of Art here in Vancouver, and so you're certainly welcome to buy a paint by numbers book and paint with it, or you can do this for free. Okay. As we look here at the top of the painting, I mean, they couldn't look more different, really. These two areas of the painting. Again, it seems a little bit absurd to do this side-by-side comparison with this particular image, but let's go all the way top left. We see a little bit more white in there. I didn't even really notice those tan colors now that I look at it. Again, I think it's really remarkable in his original painting how he was able to avoid just creating a big, a brown sludge while painting in the way that he painted. Like, that is exceptionally different or difficult, and I think anyone who's tried or trying to paint today's painting will come to that recognition that when you start mixing colors like this, keeping them as saturated and distinct as possible is really tricky. It's very, very hard not to overmix it, and especially when you're using a palette knife, right? Because people mix paints on their palette with a palette knife. That's what it's for. So keeping them like he's done, that's technically very difficult to do. Right? Again, we don't see big yellow brushstrokes. I mean, technically in his original painting there are brushstrokes of yellow like that, but nowhere near the size or relatively to the painting as I've got here. Okay, so there's one. And then so maybe I'm just going to jump right in here. I'm just going to replace this one and then we'll zoom out at the end. So let's just start at the bottom right of this one and we'll work our way back through it this way. Barbara says, is the original textured? It's hard to tell. It is textured. It's about as textured as my painting is now, relatively. Right? So you're talking in terms of level of texture, what would be a comparative? Like, I'd say in terms of his painting, it's about the thickness of a pen. Right, there's the website if you want. So it's, how big would you say this? That's like quarter of an inch, or what, 3 centimeters or something? I don't know. My math. So that, yeah, there is texture. Definitely way more texture than 90% of other paintings, but it's not like our J. DeFeo painting, which has a lot of texture to it, right? If you're thinking of like texture, that's some texture for you. Okay, so let's now look at this different painting version that I did of the original. Let's go all the way across here. Oops. It's one of those things, we could look at this and try to vote on which one do you like better, A or B. Maybe we'll do it for fun at the very end here. That's kind of cool. I like how the colors are mixing here. Barbara says, do you think he did it all in one go, or did he let layers dry and then paint? That's a great question. Yeah, that's... I would... Well, my instinct would be to say that he did it all in one go, but to get the paint to behave the way it did, I don't know. That's really interesting. That's something I want to now do some research on, because I mean, it's... I do like... Yeah. This one I'm liking up close a lot. I think any painting looks amazing when you get up close to it. All right, even your own paintings look kind of messy. Like my paintings, when I do them, I get up close, zoom in. I'm like, oh, I love it, goopy and gross. And even the most famous paintings of all time just start to look like a big sloppy mess when you get up close to them. I think that's one of the most exciting things of painting, is when they kind of fall apart when you look at them up close. It's usually the thing people are most insecure about in their own paintings. For me, it's one of my favorite parts. You know, that big bold blue is not there in the original for sure. It's been definitely broken up with his kind of signatures, those small little palette knife marks, but the goal in these has never been to make perfect copies, right? Look at this one. Side by side. Do I want to do a side-by-side comparison? Sure, why not? Let's do something. How should we do this? Too many art supplies. Too many art supplies. Which one? It's hard to... I'm trying to think if I can tell which one we did. I can't tell which one was the first one that my daughter and I began, so let's just be A and B. Okay, so let's do... Put A here first. Okay, so do you prefer painting A or do you prefer painting B? You can let me know in the comments, either the chat now or in the comment section after the video's aired, as to which one you prefer. We'll do a little bit of a side-by-side of these here in a second. So right now we're comparing them to the original, but let's do a comparison to them to each other. Let me see. Let's see. Gotta get under my microphone there. Oh, it's still not quite there. I guess that works. Okay. So which one do you prefer? It is a little bit darker here. So that might impact. Let me see if I can just brighten that up. Just gonna put there, should bounce a little bit of the light back on there. Yeah, it has a little bit of effect. Okay. So just as a side-by-side comparison, it's kind of interesting. I see Barbara says, definitely. It got more green, teal, and white in it. Interesting. It even almost has the letter A in there. I guess they both kind of do. Let's see if there's a B in there. Yeah, I guess you could say that, yes, this one definitely, it's got that big white, this extra white stroke there, so it definitely feels a little bit whiter. Although, I don't know, this feels a little bit like a foolish thing to try to compare them side by side. Barbara said, if you did 8 more of these, you definitely have something similar in the right size. Yeah, I don't know. It would be hard to make a real definitive. I mean, this one for me, this shape, almost like the letter 7, really starts to stand out. Almost to the point where it's like, maybe do I want to get rid of that? Whereas almost on the opposite side, this arrowy kind of thing is a bit much. But I think that's the thing with paintings like this, is you can just keep on looking at it and just see more and more things you like, things you don't like. So the best thing is just to let them be their own thing. Okay. Wow, that was a lot of fun. I'm glad we did this. This is something I've been wanting to do. It's been sitting here for the past like 5 months waiting for this episode to take place, and I sometimes get really anxious about things left undone. Speaking of which, there's a few things we're going to tie some loose ends on over the next few months too that I've locked in place. B seems darker overall. Interesting. Which again, good or bad, I don't know. Christina says definitely a... Okay. So we do seem to have a winner. You let me know in the chat. Again, thank you everyone for painting along and keeping me company. Especially if this type of painting is not your kind of thing. Right? I think just trying something different for a little while doesn't have to be the thing that you do for the rest of your life, but it can just be kind of a nice way to break out of the maybe a rut or creative rut that you might find yourself in, or you're feeling kind of uninspired. Just doing something radically different can help put you back on track. Remember, every time you're making art, thinking about art, talking about art, looking at art, you're making our world a better place. You're making your community, your family, a more interesting, beautiful, creative space. You're inspiring other people around you to also pursue creative endeavors. And the more people that are trying to be productive and create things and introduce and pursue beauty in life, that is only a positive thing. And it helps to counterbalance all those negative forces that we're seeing currently in our world. And just imagine if some of our world leaders took an art class, how much happier the rest of us would be, right? Okay, thanks everybody. We'll see you in our future episode next week. We're going to look at Jackson Pollock, speaking of abstract painting. Have a good night, everybody.